In this video, I am going to share with you the best way to start your journey in Assassin's Creed Shadows. The very first choice you'll be presented with when it comes to the game is to choose between having Canon mode on or off. In my opinion, Canon mode is something you should disable on your very first journey if you intend to make your own choices. But I'm pretty sure you're asking yourself, what is a Canon mode and what does it do? Well, basically, if you enable this feature, you are going to experience Assassin's Creed Shadows the way the devs intended to. The choices are going to be made for you and you will get to choose, really. The game is always going to default to the best possible choice, and who you're playing with, whether it's Naoe or Yasuke, is always going to try to pick the option which best represents their true nature. This might include missing out on some romance with some allies, or even missing out on recruiting some of those allies. So I think if you really want to be immersed, if you really want to make your own decisions, if you really want to have to pay attention to what's happening around you, let me just give you an example. Sometimes you will be presented with the option to pick a target. Those people, there may be three, there may be two, but they will act a certain way and they will talk a certain way. If you pay attention, the game is going to ask you, okay, within that group of people, who do you think you should kill? Well, if you choose Canon mode, the game is going to automatically pick the target for you. But if you really want to have the choice, if you want to be allowed to make a mistake, you should play without Canon mode activated. And also, you get to choose, if you have that feature off, whether or not you want to spare some people, because not everybody has to be killed. And you get to make the call if you decide right off the bat to disable Canon mode. Something you need to keep in mind is that that is not a feature you can later on disable. This is why this is very important that you, before you even start the game, decide to turn Canon mode off. I think this is mostly a feature you should activate once you beat the game the first time, and then you want to have a second playthrough, because then you already know what the choices are going to be, so you don't have to worry about making the wrong call. Now we need to talk about the difficulty you should choose when starting your journey. Keep in mind that difficulty is something you can switch later on. The only feature you cannot touch once you start the game is Canon mode. With that said, what difficulty should you pick when you start your brand new journey in Assassin's Creed Shadows? In my experience, I think normal offers a pretty balanced experience when it comes to difficulty, whether it's stealth or combat. If you want to feel challenged, I would highly suggest going for expert for both those features, whether it's stealth or combat. But I will have to disclose that when you pick expert for stealth, enemies tend to be more aware. They tend to spot you from farther away, and they tend to investigate more relentlessly. What I'm trying to say is rooftops are no longer safe, and you need to be very careful when it's not nighttime, because they can spot you again from pretty far away, and they will not stop investigating the area when they think they saw you. So this is something you could do if you want to push yourself, but I wouldn't recommend using expert difficulty for stealth at the beginning of the game, because you may be missing some tools, some skills to efficiently take out your foes without getting noticed, especially when playing as Naoe, because you want to avoid fighting, you want to avoid combat when playing as Naoe at first. I'm not saying she cannot fight, she can fight, she can defend herself in a scenario where you are spotted and have to deal with multiple people, but it's going to be harder for you. It is going to be harder until you get your hands on some good perks and get some mastery levels to invest into some skills. So, normal difficulty until you feel like you're ready, and then expert difficulty. Unless you want the challenge right off the bat, then you're free to choose expert across the board. Now we need to talk about a feature which may or may not be very annoying to deal with. I am referring to guided mode, the guided exploration. What does it do? Well, in Assassin's Creed Shadows, you don't exactly know where your target might be 90% of the time. You have to gather some clues, and based on those clues, you will know somewhat where to find your targets. Not exactly where, but you will have to spend some scouts. And scout is a resource in this game that you can increase over time But at the beginning of the game, you are limited when it comes to this feature. You are limited when it comes to how many people you can set out there to identify the location, the exact location of the target you are tracking. So if you always want to know where to find your targets, I think you should enable guided exploration. And something you should also keep in mind is that you also use your scouts to gather resources, and those resources are spent to improve your hideout. And once you improve your hideout, you get access to more features, whether it's from the blacksmith or having more scouts to send out there in the wild to gather resources. It just makes you better, stronger. So I would say keep your scout for gathering resources and enable guided mode. Something you also need to consider is the fact that you can still send your scout out there and they're not going to be identifying the location because, well, you guessed wrong. You can still mess up, and then you have to replenish that resource by spending money which is hard to come by. So overall, I think it's better to have this feature enabled as opposed to not having that enabled, because it just saves you a headache which can last throughout the entirety of your experience with Assassin's Creed Shadows. I previously mentioned that stealth can be improved if you choose the expert difficulty, but something I didn't mention is the fact that you can make stealth even better by enabling the guaranteed assassination feature. And what it does is ensure that as long as you get the jump on the enemy, regardless of how much health they have and the levels, because yes, enemies and gear have levels in Assassin's Creed Shadows, regardless of all those factors, if you get the opportunity to assassinate someone and they don't see you coming, you always kill the target. I think this is the way Assassin's Creed is meant to be played, regardless of the title, whether it's Shadows, Valhalla, Black Flag. I think you should always be able to kill whoever you want to kill whenever you want to do that, provided you find yourself in the right condition. So I would 100% suggest that you enable guaranteed assassination regardless of the difficulty you play the game at. And something which is great while you enable this feature is now you can go and do any mission. Especially as Naoe, you can do any mission regardless of the levels, provided you can guarantee again that you can assassinate a target. You can complete every single mission and venture in any region. I think this feature is the most important one in the game, and it changes everything. It changes the way you play and also how you spend your resources, because in order to level up and acquire some skills, you get to spend some mastery levels. But if you don't need to spend some mastery levels to enable you to assassinate targets with like plenty of health, it means you can spend your resources, your hardly earned, not that hard, but your levels into improve your assassination skills, but you can spend that elsewhere. And I think this is awesome. I think the last thing I would like to talk about when it comes to, having the best possible start are those little quality of life things you can do for yourself to have a slightly better experience. I've played this game entirely with the Japanese voices, and I gotta say, I was impressed. I was impressed by the delivery, and I felt the intensity when they were like trying to convey an emotion. I would not recommend, unless you really mind it, I would not recommend using English voices for the main, for the game until maybe you get to the end game and you no longer care about what people say. But I would say, if this is your first time playing Shadows, I will strongly recommend using the Japanese voices over the English ones. And the last thing I want to talk about are the activities and the knowledge rank. In Assassin's Creed Shadows, in order to have more knowledge, you have to perform multiple activities, and the more knowledge you have, the more tiers you're going to unlock with your skills, and the more skills you can acquire. So this is definitely something you want to unlock, and you're going to have to perform multiple activities. Now, I gotta be honest with you, some of them are pretty easy and some of them can be quite challenging. Now, I would recommend personally that you do not turn down the difficulty when it comes to those activities, because those can be very fun and again challenging. and I think this is a good way to push yourself and get familiar with the buttons you're pressing. And I think that's the only layer of real difficulty, other than the highest level, rather the highest level of difficulty you can have in the game. But you can choose to have those features, I mean those activities, simplified and dialed down to the point where it's almost impossible to fail. Because I gotta be honest with you, you have almost like what, 200 activities throughout the map. That's a lot, and I understand that not many people may have the patience to go through every single one of them and have to sweat every single time. So yeah, you get to decide if you want to have it easy or hard. I would still recommend having it hard because, well, if you're not going hard, then why go at all? Anyway, this was Assassin's Creed Shadows and how to have the best start in the game. I'm going to make a video soon when it comes to what to get early. And yeah, I think you might enjoy the game. If not, it's fine. Until then, have a good time, take care.